Hello and welcome to this special conversation on The Wire. Lydia Dean Pilcher's new film, A Call to Spy, is a story that's inspired by true events. Based on World War II, the film follows two Special Operations Executive agents who aided in the French resistance against the Nazi regime during the war. There's a special India connection as well. Radhika Apte plays Indian-Muslim Noor Inayat Khan, aside from Stana Katic, who is the British spy mistress Vera Atkins, and Sarah Megan Thomas, who is American Virginia Hall. The film is streaming on Amazon Prime Video now, and joining me to talk about the film are Lydia Dean Pilcher and Radhika Apte. Thank you, both of you, for joining in, and congratulations on what looks like, a film that's been really well received. Lydia, I like to sort of start from the start in my conversations. So tell me, what drew you to this story when you saw it? What made it click and say, yes, this is the one I want to direct and I want to be a part of?
Well, Sarah Megan Thomas, who wrote the screenplay, brought it to me in New York, and I read it, and it really spoke to so many of the themes that I identify with my own life. Like, I spend a lot of time working internationally, working in different cultures. I'm very drawn to global themes of how the world is shifting and changing and sort of the power balances, and just really fascinated with all of that. But it's a time in history that also I feel is a very relevant time for us to look back to and sort of think about what lessons may we mine from that time that we not repeat in this time. And so I think for all of those ideas and the fact that it was a story told through the eyes of three women and their experience, being a very active part in this story of resistance really compelled me.
Hmm. Some stories to learn and some that we perhaps are living as we speak, are we not? Radhika, for you, your character Noor is perhaps the most well-known of the three. There is so much narrative and so much rich material that's already out there. Was that daunting for you, or did it make it easier for you to draw on what Noor is? Because really, she has so many layers to her.
Yes, I think, of course, thanks to Lydia, I had so much material to go through and, understand. And she had done all the research before I even came on board. So, I had a lot of information and perspectives written by her, other people on her, and stuff like that. But I think what we together came to a conclusion is that yes, it is daunting if one makes it daunting, if you want to be burdened by it. But if you try to take the soul or the actual gist of it, how you interpret it and what connects you with the character, and just display that, I think that's the most honest rendition in this sort of context and setting. What we were trying to do, it wasn't a biopic. It was more of the essence of it, and the need to tell the story and the need to make these characters known. So it wasn't about how she walked and talked and exactly what she probably embodied, but what is a philosophy, and what connected her with us. Like, what was it that connected us with her? Sorry. So that's what I think we tried to do. And I think that was the most honest attempt, in our opinion, maybe.
I want to hear from both of you on this specifically, Lydia, because it's very clear this is a story that's talking about an area that's been unexplored when you talk about war and conflict, which is gender and the role of gender. I mean, we tend to talk about gender violence, of course, but we don't talk about what women actively did in these moments of strife. There's almost this smothering sexism that we attach to, narratives around war. Was that something that you consciously really wanted to take on when you took up this script? Maybe I could start with you and then go to Radhika.
Sure, of course. Women play all different kinds of roles in every aspect of society. And some of these stories, we just don't hear because women's stories for a long time haven't been as valued. But I think that is really shifting now. And I think the market understands that there is a real growing economic power of women, and that is shifting to a real strength in the female audience, and female audiences, like everybody else in every other dimension of an audience, wants to sort of see stories that, they see themselves in. So, one of the things about the three women who all worked as spies under this SOE division of Churchill's Ministry of Economic Warfare, they all came from, launched them into these positions. I mean, they had strong fathers who believed in their daughters. They were all highly educated. I mean, Noor, had studied psychology at the Sorbonne in Paris. She had a degree from the Music Conservatory, and she was a published author in Britain. I mean, she was highly accomplished, and I think that the other thing is that all three women were multilingual. And so, Noor, having grown up in Paris and really knew the city, even though she was an artist and a creative person, which is, I think, one of the things that really draws us to her. Like, why was this, Vera Atkins says, Noor, why is this war your fight? And and I think her answer is very interesting, because she's obviously very aware of the world. She's aware of what's going on. She's aware of, what's happening in India, and that India may be, approaching a time in the 1940s of, becoming independent from England. And as someone who's living in England at the time, that's interesting to Noor. And all of those things are fascinating to me. And I think as women, we're really interested in these stories.
Radhika, same question to you, and layered with the fact that, your character is a pacifist, but she has a strong moral compass. So you're playing this woman, but she's not necessarily, sort of a superwoman with a cape and a gun to tote. There are many, many sort of undertones to you. It's very underplayed and yet so nuanced.
Yes. My first film that I did actually was with another a wonderful director, Sumitra Bhave and Suri Suktankar, and there was this really funny argument that happens, and something stupid that happens, and two villages sort of start like almost a war. And there was a question asked at that time, and they were like, "Don't you think it's such a silly reason for two villages to start fighting?" And she said, "Which war is based on logical reasons? Can you please explain to me?" And so it's always. I always remember that every time. I'm obviously an anti-war. My philosophy is obviously anti-war, and it's the tragedy of life that we have wars, and they have no logical sense. But I think it's what fascinates me about Noor is that she is from this side. She's a pacifist, and she's taken part in a proper war, right? So now we see people a lot of times who are a pro-war, or who are completely anti-war, who want to do absolutely nothing with it. But the truth is, when a war takes place, whether you like it or not, it affects you. You are a part of it, So either one can sit there and be cynical and say, I'm against this, I'm just going to not do anything. But with her perspective was so, my God, compassionate and so evolved, I think. It's not just about war or anti-war. She said, this is the situation. I don't believe in it. But does that mean I am helpless? Does that mean I have no choice? How can I act but retain my philosophy and make a difference in my way? And I think that's a very new perspective, to be a part of the war and not be a part of the war at the same time. Because otherwise you just sit and do nothing. And that's what she says. What do you expect? Do you expect me to do nothing? I think to realize that sometimes things are beyond your control, but that doesn't mean there is absolutely nothing in your control. There is always something, a part of it that you can do. And I think that was a very interesting perspective for me in my own personal life, because I tend to a lot of times just go anti something and think that I can't just be a part of it in any way. And it sort of taught me to try and look at it differently, if that makes sense. I don't know.
It makes a lot of sense, and I think it makes more sense in the day and age that we all live in, country agnostic.
Yeah.
Lydia, I was drawn by this review that I read also about A Call to Spy, saying it doesn't seek to strike awe and fear, the requisites now to win battles. It is unshowy and unbombastic, populated by little people meeting their little deaths, not with big bangs, but with big hearts. Was this a conscious thought when you were creating this film, saying, because war and spy movies generally fall into one, sort of super conceived, preconceived silo. There should be lots of noise, there should be lots of drama, and you've consciously chosen not to do that. Was that top of mind for you, or did it just flow organically as you began to narrate this story?
I think it was part of my original vision for how I was going to approach it as a director. I was very interested in the psychology of, what these women were experiencing in terms of having an external identity and an internal identity, and the metaphor of how that relates to all of us as human beings and how we reconcile these two parts of ourselves to become one whole person. I wanted to create a feeling of immersion in the world and the situation, but really from their perspective. And I think that that's one thing that, we've seen this even as women have become journalists and photojournalists in the war over, in our lifetimes. What's happened is that there's a more human face on how war is portrayed and how we understand it. And how we understand it is really how through the impact of people and what happens. And that's why, I'm always very interested. There was a war photojournalist who I was very interested in, who photographed the impact of war on children across Europe. And I wanted to, incorporate children into sort of the scenes in the background of what is happening and the impact of on women. Even I think in the final scene in Dachau, when Noor is about to sort of undergo what I really wanted everyone to feel to be sort of a moment of transcendence in her final moment. But you feel it was a beautiful thing that was happening with the women in the scene of the concentration camp around. There was almost like they were coming around her, really sort of being there with her in this moment. I think these are things that we experience in life as women that we can bring to our storytelling, and it allows you a different entry point into the story. So I hadn't read that you just quoted from one of the reviews, but I love it because I think that's very much where I'm coming from. So thank you.
No, I loved it too. I thought it really put the finger on the pulse of what it was that you were doing with your storytelling. Radhika, I also read interestingly that you talked about how Stana was, she was so committed to her character that she stuck with the accent from start to finish, even while, she wasn't shooting. For you, there was the character that you brought, and then there is always an added challenge when you're doing a period piece. You have to sort of look and sound very authentic to that time. Was there something special that you did in order to prep for this? Were you speaking a certain way or being a certain way through the entire shoot?
Not actually, no, not so much. In the sense that, of course, the physical appearance was taken care of by experts. And I must tell you, this is really sounds lame and childish, but you watch films, period film, that you feel like I'm never going to be wearing those kind of dresses ever. I'll only wear like Indian traditional dresses in an Indian period drama. Yeah. I can't tell you on the look test, I was so thrilled. Those dresses were so beautiful, and all the whole thing. But anyway, that was taken care of. We did have lots of discussions about how would she speak, because she's British, but raised in France, and mother's American, father's Indian. So it was really difficult. We at times tried to sort of make it a slightly French sounding, the English, and so we did discuss a lot. But then we decided that we don't want to actually go that way, because it's really difficult to find that accent. It's insane. She belonged to the world in a way, and so we just decided to stick to my accent, which is neither here nor there, in the sense that when I'm in England I speak a little differently and then get criticized, obviously, by Indian media but or just social media, but in India I speak differently, and it's not intentional. but then we try to sort of retain that a little bit. So it's sort of a mixture. No, don't you think, Lydia?
Well, I also think you were really applying yourself on other languages, because you were, you worked on your French, because we did all of the French scenes in French, and you also learned Morse code, because you really wanted to understand what that was like. And to me, that's also another beautiful part of Noor's character, because she was a writer. I mean, one of the first things I did when we started to film was I wanted to put you up in a tree with your
we did that.
Yeah, because I think that authorial voice is really beautiful, because a character who is a writer is always thinking and observing and then translating and then sharing. And the idea that, she was a musician and a writer, and used this, code, that there was this rhythm to it, and almost like music, and she was, Vera says, you're like one of the best wireless operators in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force in the UK. I mean, Noor was already distinguished. So you were applying yourself to catch up to that. Yeah. Yeah,
it was so much fun, actually. I mean, I didn't need to learn the Morse code, but I was sat there and I was like, I have to learn it. And so we used to literally play a game sometimes of like, say anything, I'm going to write this in Morse code, or the other way around. And even French, I mean, it was so amazing to actually even meet Mathilde, because we're best friends from France in the film, and we literally just met, and the next minute we were best friends. We literally were. So it was really, really, and so that gave me a better connect with feeling that I'm French in a way. Because of her warmth and of course the language. And we had also, to be honest with you, we had a crew from everywhere. We had such a great crew, and everyone belonged to different places. So it was such a lovely place. It didn't feel like that as well. And with Lydia sort of belonging to many places and having different parallel lives, and understanding India much, much better than like anybody else on the really having passion and love for the place. So it all sort of brought this together.
And Lydia's been with the Mississippi Masala and the Reluctant Fundamentalist and A Suitable Boy. So I think we should just give her an honorary Indian, passport in any case.
Exactly.
Just be done with it. Save her the trouble at customs. But Radhika, I have heard say of some crazy Budapest bar nights. So, what happens in Budapest stays in Budapest. But I will, ask you both how hard it was, or how much you wanted to work on the camaraderie between these three women. Because we talk so much, especially in this context, in this, lens of war, we talk about the men coming together and the brotherhood and everything. But equally for the women, it's you're holding each other.
Yeah, interestingly enough, when I read the script the first time, there was no scene where the three women were in the same frame. And I couldn't, that didn't feel right to me. And even as we got into shooting, we still didn't have that scene. And we were filming the training sequence. These trainings happened for the agents in these like beautiful, magnificent mansions in the UK. And we were filming in one, and I knew it was our last day, and I knew if we didn't figure something out, we weren't going to get it. And I just said to Sarah and Radhika and Stana, I said, look, let's go over here. Let's just stage a scene that you're on a tea break, in the middle of the training. And here you are sitting on the steps, just talking to each other like we all do. I said, Stana, just, let's use this to talk about the international fabric of the resistance, because that was something else that I really was drawn to. The fact that, these women were part of a greater resistance. It wasn't just about individuals. They were a part of a mission of people coming from all, France was sort of the last holdout, for Hitler. And that's really what Churchill was afraid of. And so, but people had been coming from occupied countries all over Europe, and were really coming to France to try to join together in this resistance. And so I asked Stana to just riff off of that in the scene and tell these new recruits what it's going to be like and who are the people they're going to meet. And that became something that I felt really kind of glued their contact together before everybody sort of went off into these different parts of the world.
Radhika, come in on that.
I think what I find very interesting is that there's such cliches about gender that we see in films, right? Yeah. So there's a sort of great friendship, but also detachment that is assumed in relationships when men come together. And when women come together, there's this weird cliche about just being emotionally overwhelmed constantly and, or complete rivalry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is just a weird kind of thing depicted over and over again, I think, in films. What I find very interesting is that they are connected so deeply because they're everything at risk and they trust each other 100%. Because otherwise it's like life or death. So there's such deep connection, but there's a sense of not detachment, but acceptance of the situation and letting go and trusting their own journey and their destination and our destination together. So this is really very deeply understood yet not vocalized bond between them, which I find it's so powerful. And to be honest, that does represent the strength of women in its true sense, which you don't see when three big women become friends on cinema screen in the commercial popular space necessarily, is what I'm saying. Of course, there are many exceptions. But I think I find that very interesting in that. And I think, as you said, I remember the scene very clearly and when the day very clearly. And I remember that it was just it's just like three different lines and they just touch and go, right? Mm-hmm. in various directions. So it's just that one moment. Mm-hmm. And, but the thing is, you need that whole structure to have to hold it together. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's a very, very deep spiritual connection in a way, I feel.
Mm. Fantastic and beautifully etched by all three of you. Lydia, this is the first time you're wearing the director's hat. I know that the film premiered at the Edinburgh Film Festival, released in theatres. Sorry?
I have one film which I co-directed before this called Radium Girls, which
I stand corrected.
It's also a historical film about young whistleblowers in 1928 in New Jersey.
Should look that one up as well. As I was saying, so it released in theaters and now it's on a digital platform. Some people have pointed out that the syntax is different, when you create content for some of these digital platforms versus when you're making a movie for theatrical release. Did you feel like that? Did you need to tell the story differently, knowing that it would also have a large audience on a digital platform? Was that playing at all on your mind?
Well, I've always made feature films. That's been the sort of the core of my storytelling. And I am very motivated, by camera and the direction of camera, and I love composition. And I am aware that, I think as a culture, and I think especially with the upcoming millennial culture, people are watching content on smaller screens. And I hope that the big screen doesn't go away completely because that's the ultimate in the immersive experience as an audience. But I think you do have to be aware that, people are watching content the way they're going to watch it. And so I think, I think you do think about that in terms of composition, and you want to bring the camera closer to your subjects so that the emotion, whatever size people are watching the film on, that they are getting the emotion that you want them to take away from a scene.
Mm-hmm. Radhika, I also read that Lydia mentioned her favorite character is indeed Noor of the three. If you had, and I don't know if it's because of you or because of the character, I imagine it's a mix of both. But if you had to pick a favorite, would it be the character that you played, or were you drawn to one of the other two in terms of, everything that they had going for them?
I mean, it's really difficult to pick a favorite. It's like a weird question. I'm sorry, but to pick a favorite amongst these three. But I mean, if I'd rephrase the question, if you don't mind, for myself, which do I feel closest to, and that would be, of course, Noor. For so many reasons. I mean, because I've studied her closely, I've connected with her in my own way while performing, and I've tried to portray her, tried to, be loyal to what she taught me or gave me. And her philosophy resonates with me every day. And she was half Indian, so and I mean I'm not a patriot in that way. So I'm not saying because she's half Indian, but I'm just saying there are some roots that connect us in our culture and our upbringing and how we look at life in ways. So I think there are so many connections, and ultimately I think she was absolutely one of the most incredible personalities that I've read or I've known of.
I just want to say, can I just say one thing to that too? Because one of the things I love about the character is this seeming contradiction between, being trained to go kill and, conduct sabotage and subversion in a war while she comes from a tradition of pacifism. And the fact that in her own mind, she had to reconcile that before she went. And the reconciliation had to do with the fact that her resistance wasn't based on hate. And I think that these are real words from Noor. And I really carry those as kind of watchwords, because I think that in this age of globalization, it's faceless. Personal identity becomes tribal. And if my identity hates your identity, then it's nationalism. And I think that this identity issue is central, because what we were experiencing with Hitler was a real collective hatred. And that collective hatred is the thing that we never really want to repeat again, although this power and this influence of globalization sort of does seem to be pushing us in that direction. So I think for me, Noor was in a place where she wasn't willing to accept that hatred could be legitimized. She as an artist saw the world in a way where, love has a place. And that's what really fascinated me about Noor's character and the position that she was in, embodying such a world perspective, such a global perspective, even in 1940s. I think she really has something to offer in that way.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to something you mentioned right at the start of our conversation as we wind down, Lydia, in terms of what it was that you were trying to tell in this story. And I think that's the most important takeaway, which is that in war, it's not the arms and ammunition and the battleships, it's the loss of humanity that is, really the saddest sort of outcome of any kind of violent conflict. Do you feel that that's really, what you wanted to put across in your story, and it came across as well?
Yeah, I do. I think it's that. I think it's all of these things I was just saying. I think it's also, I think Radhika made a really important point, which is also a watchword, for me, which is that I think, we have a lot of power as individuals, but we give it up when we think we don't have it. And, I'm talking to you from a country that has just, come very close to the brink of an abyss in terms of our democracy. And, we've actually seen what can happen when people come together and acknowledge and realize that their vote matters, their voice matters. And I think that that's what these women realized back then, that their voice mattered enough, that there wasn't anything else they could be doing except what they were doing.
Yeah. Radhika, you want to add to that? Because it's, as you said, there's a time to speak up, even when it doesn't affect you, but when it's wrong.
Sorry, say that again. Sorry, I missed you.
Yeah, I said if you'd like to add to what Lydia said, because there is a point in time when you need to speak up, even though the changes aren't affecting you, but it's wrong. What you see unfolding before you is not okay.
Yes, but I think the changes, it always affects you. That's the thing. I think we think it doesn't affect us, but everything has a consequence, and you are all made of consequences. You can sit and say that, oh, I'm comfortable, it's affecting them, but should I speak about it? No, that does affect you eventually.
Yeah.
I think that's when we talk about, we are very privileged people, and we decide to not talk about certain things and say about crime or whatever that takes place, and different kinds of injustices, is that a word?
Yeah.
That takes place in the world, and we find one culprit and we either hang them or we give them punishment, but we are all responsible to that crime. We are all responsible for that injustice to happen, and vice versa. Everything that happens does affect us. So I think when we think it doesn't, I'm not involved, is like sleepwalking. It's called willful blindness. You are involved, and you've got to, there are powers you have, and you have to do something about it, because otherwise all we do is sit at home and criticize, and that's about things that are not in your control. So it's just extremely pointless in the sense you're not making use.
Yeah.
And making a difference in your own life. So I think everything affects us. What is happening in America does affect me in India. And I think that's what the whole idea also behind Noor participating in the war was. What happens here affects any single person sitting in India. In turn, it'll affect somebody in Africa. I'm just saying that, it's always as a Buddhism thing, no? Everything is a consequence.
Yeah.
No thing is what two things come together makes something else. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, sort of important lessons for the journalistic community as well, Radhika and Lydia, where we're living the damages of what fake news and what vitiated news can do to an atmosphere and to a society directly and indirectly. We're almost out of time, but I wish you both the very best of luck. Lydia, I wanted to check if, the series hits Netflix as well, or just Amazon?
Are you when you say the series, do
The
you
film,
mean
I mean, sorry. Yeah.
A Call to Spy?
Yes.
Yeah, no, A Call to Spy is in India as an Amazon original. So that's where to find us in India.
So the reason I ask is because Radhika should be now primed for a next series of memes about how she's, betrayed and broken the hearts of all the Netflix viewers by not showing up over there. I don't know if you've seen it, Radhika, but those memes are out already saying, oh, now she's not on Netflix after the whole spate of there's so much of Radhika on Netflix.
Do they even care about how many times Netflix has broken my heart? I mean, if the relationship was true, I should have been in every single film and series. Why am I not?
I hope 2021 fixes that. I really do. But thank you both, ladies, for speaking with me and your time today. I wish you the very best and every success with your film, Lydia. Thank you.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.